Welcome back to the Fireplace. Tonight's story is a quiet one about secrets, second chances, and the letter that changed everything. Make yourself comfortable. Let the firelight flicker, and lean in close as we begin a secret love hidden for decades until she read the letter. Claire had lived in the old stone cottage on the edge of the village for almost 2 years. It wasn't hers, not technically. It had belonged to her grandmother, and when she passed, Claire inherited it, along with boxes of forgotten letters, dusty lace curtains, and the kind of silence that pressed against your chest at night. She wasn't running, at least that's what she told people. But the truth was, after everything fell apart, after Thomas left without explanation, after her job dissolved into a polite email goodbye, she needed a place that felt like something she could hold on to. So she moved into the cottage with the overgrown roses and squeaky floorboards, and told herself she would write. Maybe a novel. Maybe just her way out of grief. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon, while searching for a heavier quilt in the attic, that she found the letter. It was hidden between the pages of an old book, one of her grandmother's journals. The envelope was worn, ivory paper sealed with wax, so old it had crumbled at the corners. Her name was written on it in handwriting that stopped her breath. Thomas. Her Thomas. But this wasn't a letter to her. The postmark was dated 2 years ago, the same week he had disappeared from her life. She sat down on the attic floor, fingers trembling, heart rattling against her ribs like a frightened bird. She hesitated. This letter wasn't meant for her, but it had her name on it. She opened it. "Claire, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe it's better if you don't. But I need to write it anyway. I left because I was scared. Not of you. Of how much I loved you. It started to feel too big, too real. And I didn't know how to be the man you needed me to be. I was afraid I'd ruin it. Ruin you. But leaving didn't make me less afraid. It only made me regret. Every single day. I hope you find someone braver, kinder, someone who doesn't run." Later that evening, she brought the letter downstairs and sat by the fireplace. The flames were soft, licking the logs, casting gold on the pages. She laid the letter beside her teacup and stared at it for a long time. And then, almost instinctively, she reached for her phone. She hadn't called him since the day he left, but his number was still saved, still etched into her muscle memory like a song from another lifetime. She typed out a message. "I found your letter. I think we should talk." Then she stared at the screen. She didn't send it. Not yet. The next morning, she woke early. The sky was soft gray, fog curling over the hills like a blanket. She made tea, read the letter again. This time she wept, not for the pain, but for the way love still echoed through time, like an unanswered melody. She didn't send the message for 3 more days. When she finally did, it was simple. "I read it. I understand," he responded within the hour. "Can I come see you?" They met in the garden behind the cottage. He looked older, tired, but when he saw her, something lit up behind his eyes. A recognition, a homecoming. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought I was doing what was best." "I know," she said, "but maybe now we can figure out what's best together." He nodded, quietly, carefully, and she let him take her hand. They didn't rush. They rebuilt from whispers, not declarations, from shared books, Sunday walks, and conversations that felt like spring after a long winter. Claire never regretted reading the letter. She believed it had found her at the exact moment she was ready to understand it. It was never just ink on paper. It was a turning point, a second beginning. And here is the second story, one that begins with a broken fence and a cup of tea left out in the rain. Margaret had lived in her little brick cottage at the edge of the village for nearly 12 years. Her garden was the pride of the neighborhood. Wild roses climbing over old trellises, lavender swaying in the breeze, and a small bench beneath the apple tree where she read her favorite novels. She liked the quiet, loved it even. After a heartache many years ago, one of those gentle, silent heartbreaks that leave no one to blame, she found peace in solitude. She taught music at the local school, baked bread on Sundays, and grew dahlias taller than her fence. And then came the new neighbor. Thomas was not what you'd call a man of the soil. He arrived with moving boxes, a stubborn little dog, and a car full of mismatched furniture. He worked from home, though no one quite knew what he did, and for the first few weeks, all Margaret saw of him was the flickering light from his upstairs window. That changed one windy morning in early spring. The storm the night before had torn down part of the fence between their houses. Margaret stepped out in her slippers to inspect the damage and found Thomas already there, kneeling in the wet grass, looking sheepish and holding a slat of broken wood. "I think this one belongs to you," he said with a smile that was half apology, half invitation. They laughed about it, awkwardly at first, then spent the next 2 hours rebuilding the fence together, talking about everything from old record players to the best way to make tea. She was horrified to learn he microwaved his water. By the time the last nail was hammered in, she realized she hadn't laughed that much in years. The days that followed were slow and soft, like a gentle melody building towards something sweeter. He brought over lemon tarts from the bakery. She returned the favor with tomato soup in a thermos. His dog took a liking to her sun-warmed porch. And one day, quite suddenly, the fence between their yards was no longer a boundary, but a shared space. Margaret, cautious by nature, told herself it was just neighborly kindness. Thomas, who had also known loss, never pushed. But every evening, as she watered her roses, he'd appear on the other side, cup of tea in hand, freshly boiled water, he promised. And they'd talk. They talked about books, about music, about how strange it was to find something tender blooming when neither of them had been looking. Then came the day she caught a cold and stayed indoors. She expected a quiet evening, but at dusk she heard a gentle knock on her back door. There he stood, holding a tray with 2 cups of tea and a small note that read, "I boiled the water, and I miss our garden talks." It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, Margaret felt something shift, like an old window finally opening. Seasons passed. They planted vegetables together, argued about where to put the rosemary, and even built a little gate in the middle of the fence, just wide enough for a man, a woman, and 1 stubborn dog. Crisp autumn evening, as the sky turned golden and the last apples fell from the tree, Thomas turned to her on the garden bench and asked quietly, "Do you think maybe we've been neighbors long enough?" Margaret smiled, rested her head on his shoulder, and whispered, "I think the fence knew it before we did." And that's how 2 quiet souls with a few broken boards and a shared love of tea found their way to something lasting. Thank you for spending this evening by the fire. If this story stirred something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a wish, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the words we were never meant to read are the ones we needed most. Until next time, sleep well, and may your heart always find its way home.